So you don't have to be live streaming too long before you start running into some challenges or even hearing the terms lag and latency used interchangeably. Are these the same? No. One deals with the transfer in time from when you say something to when your audience hears it so they can start interacting and responding to it. And the other one kind of makes you look like you're in some old kind of crazy looking film where your words and gestures are saying one thing and then the audio looks completely different. So these are not the same, and if you're having challenges with one or the other, you need to do totally different things. Let's start with latency because this is really a cut and dry issue that's very easy to dissect. Latency is the delay between a user's action and web application's response to that action, meaning a platform like Facebook, for example, has about a 30-second delay. So that latency period from you saying something, if I say, hey, put a number 1 in the chat if you do X and put a number 2 in the chat if you do B, then people would start putting in those different corresponding letters or numbers or what have you. And what I'm having to do at that point is wait, because from the time that I say it, it's going to be about 30 seconds my time before they actually hear it real time in there. So you'll have to find something to do in the in between. All platforms have this. It's just a matter of, can you do something to get ultra low latency or low latency in general. With Facebook, there's not a ton that you can really do, but that's just something that's native to the platform, so it's something to expect. So if you're knowing you're going to ask your audience to do something, make sure you account for those 20 to 30 seconds. Everything has latency, even the news that you watch or some streaming platform or anything. From the time that they actually hit a button, hit play, or transition to a new scene, you don't know the difference because you're just seeing that show progress normally, but they know what that latency period is. So it's really just something for you, the live streamer, to deal with. So let's talk about the other one, which is lag. Lag is what most people are experiencing when they sometimes say latency. Lag is the difference sometimes where you see where you're really stuttery and choppy, so it looks like frames are missing or segments are missing out of the video even though you haven't touched anything. And there also may be signs of lag if you notice your gestures are doing one thing and your words are coming there afterwards. To handle this, there are a couple things, so let's dive into a few tips. The first thing to fix if you're dealing with lag is to make sure you're connected via Ethernet and not Wi-Fi. There are two totally different speeds when you are streaming via Wi-Fi signal and you're not connected to anything versus when you're connected to Ethernet and you have something coming out of your wireless router or modem and it's going straight from that device over to your wireless hub or your computer. Ethernet is going to ensure that you get the fastest speeds possible. Wi-Fi is not going to do that. And even if the speeds are comparable, you're more likely to have significant dips at times, depending on where you may be located, that's different from the Wi-Fi router. So this may mean getting a Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable and running that the length of wherever you need it to for your live streaming space to make sure you can be connected via Ethernet. The second thing that you can do is check your sources, check your cables, check your connections and your plugs. Even if a cable hasn't been moved around for it to be stressed out a lot, you still may want to update it because as you're upgrading your internet speeds, you also want to upgrade your equipment. So something like the Wi-Fi router would be one that you would want to check out and get updated and see, is it still relevant? And pro tip here, if you're trying to figure out what is the best internet package that you would probably need or get, consider what's called gig internet, which means you'll get about 1 gig downloads down, maybe about 30, 40, even 50 megabits per second if you are talking about uploading and that's your streaming stuff. So you just want to get the best that you can get access to in your area. That way you have reliable and dependable live streaming service. The third thing is to check your camera and your software. Sometimes your camera could be at 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or even 60 frames per second if you are live streaming, which means that your software now needs to be at that same corresponding frame rate. The last tip here is really going to be checking to see if your hardware, your computer, can handle all of the speeds and all of the tech that you are throwing at it. Sometimes people may be using a 2011 or 2012 MacBook Pro or MacBook Air or something from back in the day and trying to make it do significant speeds, and it just cannot handle the 27 Google Chrome tabs that you have open, in addition to streaming in 4K and all of the individual processes that are required from the cam links that you use, the Rodecaster Pros, or anything. Like, you're connecting a ton and drawing a lot on this system and processor, and it just cannot handle that plus streaming. So while it may be good in some use cases or at limited use cases, you may want to consider upgrading your computer. And again, by default, all of the cables that you're going to be connecting to it, just to make sure that your hardware can actually handle it. This is what we found most of the time, is people are just using computers that are far too old and they are not powerful enough to handle all of the things that you want to do when it comes to live streaming. I know sometimes software companies or tools can say you only need this minimum requirement, but that's the base minimum requirement that you would need for it to operate. What you would need for it to operate optimally is going to be something totally different. And you also want every individual tool that you're operating with to operate at an optimal pace. So you need everything to be able to breathe and function normally. So I recommend at least getting anywhere from 16 to 32 gigabytes of RAM. You're at least using a quad core processor, and make sure you have a dedicated graphics card so that it's not only operating on the core processor, but it has a dedicated graphics card that can handle some of the things that you're throwing at that. And that could be like a 4 gigabyte, 8 gigabyte or better. Really go for the 8 gigabyte if you can swing it, but you want to get the best thing possible. One of the best live streaming machines is the new Apple M1, and if you want to see some more details on that, why it's the best machine when it comes to live streaming, make sure you check out the video on the screen, and we'll see you in the next video.